and welcome to the very first edition, the inaugural edition of Alternative Wrestling Review. This is the first episode, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Alex G. You should know that this is my YouTube channel. And join me for this endeavor, you'll recognize them from Retro Wrestling Games Presents, Luke Martin. How you doing tonight, Luke?
I'm doing just great.
All right, man. I dig that. And now, guys, what we're trying to do, and the overall premise of this show, is that we're going to take a look at the alternatives from mainstream wrestling. Obviously, you have your mainstream WWE currently, and as we go back in the past, you had your mainstream WWF, WCW, and what have you. But we're going to take a look at the alternative sides of professional wrestling. We'll take a look at your independents, your international promotions, and your outlaw mud show promotions as well. We're going to take a look at each and every one of them, ones that are currently active, and we'll take a look back and some of them from the past as well. So, buckle up. You're in for a hell of a ride. As we start this off, I think there comes a moment in any wrestling fan's life where the light bulb goes on and they figure out that there's wrestling outside of their normal bubble. So if you started out watching WWE, at a certain point you discovered, would it be WCW or ECW or what have you. I think everyone has that moment. I know there's some younger wrestling fans that maybe listen to that haven't had that moment yet, and maybe this will be that come to Jesus moment where they finally learn that there's wrestling outside of the mainstream bubble. So I guess my first question to you, Luke, is, when did you realize there was wrestling outside, whatever you started watching at first? What was it? Was it WCW or WWE?
It was WCW. So once I got cable TV, I was blessed to have both WCW and WWE at the time. And I grew up right when the Monday Night Wars started. So that was the perfect time to kind of understand that there was wrestling that went beyond those two mainstream promotions. The thing about the Monday Night War time period is you were kind of confined to WCW, WWE, and it was much more difficult to branch out beyond anything that was on cable. So I knew that there were Mexican wrestlers because of WCW, and I knew that there was Japanese wrestling because of WCW, but I didn't have any way to access that because I was like a kid, obviously, and it was more. I mean, you can attest to the fact that you had to get tapes and things like that, and you had to know who to ask. You couldn't. It wasn't an easy, or there was no internet. You couldn't just get on and say, "Hey, I want a tape of XYZ." It was difficult to find those things. So, but yeah, WCW, WWE was, I think, people my age, probably those were the first two that they discovered. So,
for me, it was slightly different. Of course, I started watching wrestling in 1987. Started with the WWF, and then it wasn't even a couple of months before I discovered WCW. And in being in the Northeast, in New York especially, we started getting weird wrestling. So every once in a while, we get an ICCW, we get AWF randomly, we get USWA on ESPN. We get AWA on ESPN. We got World Class, every once in a while. Even a couple of years prior to me watching, we got, Florida Championship Wrestling in New York. So there was always things around. But I think for me, when the world expanded, was definitely opening up an issue of PWI and seeing all the wrestling from around the world and what they covered. And I was like, oh, man, Jerry Lawler is awesome. It's like, oh, the Moondogs, they're fucking awesome. And it's those kind of like moments when you realize like, oh, like so-and-so didn't start wrestling and then went to the WWF. Like Barry Windham had this whole career before he went to the WWF. Arn Anderson had this whole career, before he went to WWF. It wasn't like these guys literally came off the street. They came from somewhere. And it was cool seeing young guys. I watched Steve Austin in USWA. And then I saw him kind of graduate to WCW and then eventually going to the WWF. So you see guys kind of come up through the ranks, and I thought that was always really cool. And I started late in terms of tape trading, much later than most people that are super into tape trading. I think I got my first tape like in 99, 2000. It was, the internet was still thing, but it was still exceedingly difficult to get tapes. And I would see promotions like Jim Kettner's promotion. I would see the kind of origins of like CZW. I would see the origins of XPW, and like, holy shit, like what the hell is this? And I thought that stuff was really cool. And then you had your independent rebirths. So when WCW closed, you had all these independents kind of start up, right after, WCW, ECW closed down. So we saw the birth of MLW, we saw the birth of Ring of Honor, and that was like the birth of 3PW. I started getting tapes, mainly from High Spots and RF Video, and then eventually I did amass quite a collection. And it took me forever to digitize everything. And now I have these hard drives that are full of wrestling footage, and I can go years, maybe a whole decade, with watching wrestling and not watching the same show twice. That's how much stuff I have, and and then we're gonna go through it. I'm gonna send Luke stuff, and we're gonna take a look at it, and there's a lot of stuff that I want to go back and check it again. There's a lot of stuff that you end up missing, but when we talk about today's wrestling, the modern wrestling landscape is like, there's nothing out there that happens in the wrestling world that is inaccessible to us. So if there's a wrestling promotion going on somewhere, it's probably being taped, and I could probably see it on the internet. It goes to show you the kind of like how professional wrestling is still, it's on solid footing. A lot of people saying like, oh, we're in a down period, and maybe the WWE is currently down in terms of the creative and what have you, but there's stuff coming on the horizon. So when we see, AEW, getting all the buzz right now, we see the rebirth of MLW, we see the NWA come literally out of nowhere. We see Game Changer Wrestling that's doing some really innovative and cool stuff. It makes me very excited as a wrestling fan, and I know a lot of people who just watch WWE have a hard time kind of watching these other promotions. I'm like, give it a chance. Be patient because it's not WWE. They're not going to have, in some cases, not going to have the glitz and glamour and the stars that you may know. But you become a fan of of newer wrestlers as they come. Like MJF is amazing, and we would have never really saw him all that much if we didn't watch MLW. And now he's on AEW, and he's going down to AAA now with Cody. He's going to have a big tag team match down there coming up shortly. And I'm surprised that WWE, and maybe they already have tried to sign him up, but he's like the number one guy on the independents right now, in my opinion. So very excited to see that. But there's so much stuff out there, guys. And I always say this: if you don't like the current WWE product, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I bet you, and I'm willing to bet you $1 million that there's a wrestling promotion out there for you to get behind. You have your local independents that you can go to. You have House of Hardcore that you can go to. There's so much stuff out there right now, and it might take a little bit of work, but not as much work it did in 1999 for me. That's for sure. So Luke, the first show that you wanted to take a look at was MLW's King of Coliseum. Now, as I mentioned before, MLW was founded in 2002 in Philadelphia, kind of in the wake and of the ashes of the demise of WCW in ECW, and we saw a lot of these promotions pop up. It ran for a while. They had a couple big shows. You saw like CM Punk on there. Joey Styles was the announcer. They had Sabu and Terry Funk and Carino. And it was really, really, really cool for a while, and then I guess they just folded in 2004 when Court Bauer took that job in WWE. So after having success in the podcasting world, they felt the need like, we can go back and revisit an MLW as a legitimate wrestling promotion. So again, super excited to see them back, and I think from the shows that I've watched, they're doing a fantastic job overall. So King of Coliseum. So Luke, what was your first kind of exposure to MLW?
I think I just saw it on YouTube. Really, I was just looking on YouTube. I saw it was Battle Riot 2, and I saw that it was a battle royal. I just watched it. Didn't really know much about MLW. And I watched it, and I really enjoyed it. I like battle royals. They're just fun, easy shows to get into. They don't really require a lot of thinking or a lot of backup. It's neat because you get to see a lot of people you normally don't get to see. And it just so happened that MLW was the one holding that. It popped up in my news feed. I guess I don't know what you call it on YouTube, but my
Suggested
recommended.
videos.
Yeah. So I clicked on it and watched it, and it ended up being really good. I was really invested and interested in it. And like you were talking about, if you're still in that bubble of just WWE and that's it, or maybe even just AEW just popped up on your radar. The nice thing about MLW is that it's very easy to watch and get into, and it's not flashy, but it's not complicated, and the matches are straightforward. There's not it's not hard. You're not watching CML or AAA like Lucha Libre. You're not trying to watch New Japan. Like, the style is simple. It's not hard to follow. If you like WWE, if you like AEW, if you like whatever, you're going to be able to enjoy this because it's just good, solid wrestling. There's not a lot of frills to it, but that's not a bad thing. They don't overdo it, and they don't try to do more than they need to do.
I think when it comes to MLW, again, I think we're going to use that word solid quite a bit because there's no holes in their game. All around is very solid. And when we look at some of the people who are backstage with MLW, you see like they have a lot of guys with a lot of WWE experience in terms of their backstage, which, they have Alex Greenfield, obviously Court Bauer, you have Jared St. Laurent back there, and you have one name that really stood out to me, Nelson Swegler. Now, Nelson Swegler produced WrestleMania 1. So he's been around for a very, very long time. He was the Kevin Dunn before Kevin Dunn. He produced Primetime Wrestling, and he did a lot of those shows for during the WWE expansion into the 90s. And another name that stands out to me is Dave Sahadi. Now, Dave Sahadi was the guy that did all those really, really good WWF Attitude Era hype videos. So if you like the Freddie Blassie video and you like some of the videos going into the pay-per-view, it was Dave Sahadi who did those. So again, in terms of their production team, very, 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 they have a ton of experience. And, it's really good to see that they got some of these guys. I think their backstage crew is probably better than AEW's backstage crew. And then in terms of they brought back Tony Schiavone. Rich Bikini is a really good, commentator. They use Stryker. They have Cornette doing a color commentator as well, and he does some stuff backstage. I believe he's an agent as well. And they just recently brought in Georgia Smith, who I have a personal crush on. I think she is gorgeous, and I love Georgia Smith. So, it's again across the board. If you're a traditional wrestling fan like me, and I consider myself a traditionalist, but I am very open-minded. But I consider myself a traditionalist. You're gonna like MLW for sure. Like, there's no two ways about it. Everything they do, there's no wasted time. There's no throwaway matches. There's no throwaway angles. Everything means something. It's easy to watch, easy to follow. It's an hour show. They do have TV, but I think most people will probably end up watching it on YouTube, as you should. And I think across the board is like, this is just good wrestling. And, my biggest thing is when it comes to a lot of the other promotions, whether it be Ring of Honor or WWE, Impact, is like, just do good wrestling. And everything else will fall into place. And that's what MLW is doing. They're doing good wrestling. And the people they have backstage and their writing team, these are guys that know what they're doing. They appreciate history. They mention it all the time on their shows. So, for a traditional wrestling fan like myself, who may not like some of the shenanigans and tomfoolery that you may see in the independents, Major League Wrestling is for you.
I think, too, like when you talk about history and just mentioning things that happen outside of MLW specifically is good. So I really like history just in general. So I think it's interesting when they bring things up or they talk about, this guy is from, wrestles down in Mexico in AAA or whatever. But at the same time, too, it helps frame the match, and it helps frame the wrestler. So all they have to do is give me a little bit of a breakdown about some of the history or why this is important, and so it just adds to it. It gives MLW a legacy that it not necessarily it actually has. So if, in the NFL or in all these other sports, you have long tradition, and that's why some of these things are important or adds weight to them or adds weight to rivalries or makes it interesting. It's always interesting if you see somebody that's, the son of a legend or, that sort of things, or they're related, or they add those extra wrinkles by not trying to keep it in this weird MLW bubble.
Yeah.
So that just those little things, like you said, just mentioning history, it just makes it makes it just easier for you to relate. Like, why do I care about XYZ? Like, they give you just enough reason to care a little bit about what's going on. They don't try to beat you. Not every match has to have an angle to it. And they do have angles, but they don't. Not every match is is so important, right? You can have a match that occurs, and it doesn't necessarily have an angle to it, but it still matters because the way that they frame it. And they have stables, and we'll kind of get into kind of the lay of the land for MLW a little bit, but the way that they do their stables and their factions that don't like each other, but they're not always, like, they'll have matches against one another from time to time and things like that, but they won't always, it doesn't always have to turn into an all-out brawl or something ridiculous. Like, they still act like they're there to win titles. They still act like those things matter. They're not just there to fight all the time. And I think that they have a little bit of everything for everybody. And the people that they have, the workers that they all fill a specific niche, and the niche that they fill, they do a really good job of it. So,
yeah, I like the fact that you can tune in to any episode of MLW Fusion and immediately be caught up on what's happening. You're not sitting there trying to figure out who's who, why does this person doesn't like this person. They did a really good job explaining what's happening, so you can literally watch any episode and be automatically caught up and understand what's going on. And there's a lot of professional wrestling. I think you look at WWE, and we're gonna have to, when we do these shows, we're gonna compare it to WWE quite a bit because, they're the biggest promotion in the world currently. And sometimes when you watch a WWE show, you can watch it Monday Night Raw and not know anything that's happening. It's just shit just happening, right? And you're kind of expected to know what's going on, and you can get lost. Like, if you're flipping the channels, you can easily get lost in what's going on in WWE. Like, you don't know the angles, or, this guy was a bad guy this week, but this week he's a good guy. We don't know why, type shit. So I think MLW does a good job of explaining the motivations behind each and every wrestler, the motivations between each and every feud, and everything they do is it's so solid. It's so fundamentally strong. They're literally right now like the San Antonio Spurs of the professional wrestling. Like, they're just, they may not have the biggest stars, and they have a few, but they don't have the biggest. But they're so fundamentally good that they're going to be able to outclass just about anyone in terms of, the television show and now their upcoming pay-per-view. So I'm very excited to see what they're going to do moving forward with their pay-per-view.
I also like we talked about earlier, when you watch MLW, you're seeing a lot of these guys that are going to go on to do big things. So, like I said, we'll highlight the roster, but you if you watch AEW, they have some of these AEW rosters. They have MJF, we talked about. Yeah. They have Jimmy Havoc. Those guys are currently wrestling in AEW, so they're already bigger names. But they also have young people in it that are just like, that's the neat thing I think about MLW, is they have a good mix of old and new, and a lot of the young new people that they have, they're something special, and they're going to continue to move on, but at least you get to appreciate seeing them now. Like, everybody knew that CM Punk or whatever was an indie darling, but it's hard to go back and find. You can try to find old CM Punk matches, but to watch MJF work in MLW is awesome, because he still works in AEW from time to time, but here he's spotlighted, and I think it's cool to watch him and really get an appreciation for how good he actually is as he continues to grow. He's only 23 years old.
Yeah, he's so young. And by the way, I think I have like a 40-hour best of CM Punk in the Indies. a video somewhere on my computer. So I might send that over to you because you might
I
enjoy
appreciate
that. Yeah, MJF, 23 years old. To me, right now, he's the most relatable person to me in professional wrestling because he's from Long Island. So am I. I went to high school with people just like him. I went to college with people just like him. And I work with people who are just like him. So to me, it's like, I want to punch him in the face so much because he's so familiar to me. Because, his character, which I hate to even use the word character, but I think that's a lot of it is himself. Is like you're literally your prototypical kind of Long Island tool bag, and I hate his guts, but I love the fact that I hate his guts. Like I want to see him get beat up on TV all the time, and he does such a great job of it. And I think at 23 years old, I think he's already a superior heel to Adolf Ziggler. And I think he's reaching the level of like Miz level heelism, I guess I don't know if it's the appropriate word, but I think eventually he's going to be a bigger heel and a better heel than the Miz could even dream of. Because he's doing it at such a young age, he's always come along so fast already.
Right, and he's very good about balancing out what he does. So he isn't like the prototypical like chicken shit kind of heel.
Yeah.
But he can act that way. But at the same time, he's arrogant, but he's not afraid of people. So
right.
he does a very good balancing act between those things. But he is just an asshole, and he gets heat. People don't like his face, right. And when he talks, he makes people not like him. Not because they want him to go away; they actually want more of him. Yeah. But that's because they hate him so much. So anytime he's involved in a match, he always elevates it. And he doesn't even have to be in the match. So that's pretty amazing to do and be 23.
One of the best things about MLW, and I think they're one of the few promotions that actually pull this off, their heels get heat and their babyfaces get the appropriate reaction. So they're not trying to hijack a show heel. The heels get the right reaction, the babyfaces get the right reaction, and there's a clear delineation between babyfaces and heels. And there's not there's not tweeners, there's not none of that shit. And they're the only promotion right now that's doing that effectively. You have your heels on one side, you have your babyfaces on the other side, and they get the appropriate reactions. Like no one's trying to be, too smarky. They're not trying to hijack the fucking, the show. It's just, it is what it is, and they get the appropriate reaction, which is amazing nowadays because the WWE can't even pull that off.
I just think that they do a good job because they let them play their character. So they let them be a heel, and the face be a face. You don't ever see the heel trying to appeal to the crowd. Like he's always trying to piss people off. And the face isn't always he isn't always like trying to get the crowd into it, but he's always fighting that guy that pissed you off. So even though Tom Lawler might not be Angel, I don't care that he might do something when the ref isn't looking because the bad guys are so much worse, right? Like they're just getting their comeuppance. And I think that's the thing about a lot of things is because the way they're not allowed to be straight up heel, they don't ever get their comeuppance, right? Or it just doesn't work. But they don't always have to win. They just have to get kind of fight fire with fire. Like they're so fed up, they eventually they give it to them the way that they deserve, right? So, and I think the nice thing about AEW too is that they embrace the fact that people have different styles and they actively promote it. So if you watch the beginning of it or you go to their website, they're constantly that's like part of their gimmick. Like, oh, Tom Lawler is a MMA fighter. Like that's what he does, right? That's his fighting style. Or so and so is a brawler or lucha libre or a mat technician or stuff like that. Like I think that's neat. That a lot of promotions they emphasize that clash of styles. So it's interesting to see those things, and they make like Tom Lawler. They'll constantly reference the fact that he was a UFC fighter, which is neat because that's kind of his fighting style, right? He's almost like what's that kid in Next right now?
Matt Riddle.
Yeah, Matt Riddle. He's a lot like Matt Riddle. I think Matt Riddle's better, but Lawler emphasizes strikes and submissions a lot. And I think that's cool because you don't really see that. Like everybody, for whatever reason, a lot of people in WWE, their styles kind of just blend together, right? Like there are people that are outliers, but a lot of the main guys kind of just their stuff starts to blend together. But I think the nice thing about MLW is that they embrace the fact that people are different and they allow them to be different and they point out how they're different as opposed, I guess they focus more on what's going on in the ring and not so much whatever's going on beyond it, right? Like when it's time for the match, they focus on the match. They might bring in things here and there, but the main focus is what's going on in the ring, not whatever, they're not trying to get you to buy a toy or something, whatever WWE does at a given moment during their announce. So I think their announce team is really solid, but I think that it's important that they do that because it makes it simple. So like
the commentators are trying to get over the wrestlers, not the promotion. And that's something that WWE's been lacking for 15 years. One of the reasons why none of the wrestlers are over.
Yeah.
But quickly, before we go into the card, I want to quickly go over the roster. And I'm going to start off with the current world champion, which is Jacob Fatu. We have Teddy Hart. We have Davey Boy Smith Jr., Tom Lawler, Low-Key, La Parka, or La Park if you want to be a dick about it, MJF, Alex Hammerstone, Marshall Von Erich, Ross Von Erich, Joseph Samael, Austin Aries, Simon Gotch, Mance Warner, Ricky Martinez, El Hijo de La Park, Jimmy Havoc, Gringo Loco, Richard Holiday, Flamita, Brian Pillman Jr., Ace Austin, Myron Reed, Ray Audas, Zenshi, Airwolf, Puma King, Cotto Brazil, Jordan Oliver, Ariel Dominguez, Barrington Hughes, who's awesome, by the way, Vando Artugan, and Jimmy Yuta. Managers currently in the promotion, you have Selena De La Renta, Conan, and Aria Blake. Also, you have appearances by one of my all-time favorites, Colonel Robert Parker, if you will. Now, looking at their Twitter currently, Alex Hammerstone is going to fight Savio Vega at Never Say Never. Fucking Savio Vega, awesome.
Ridiculous. I can't believe that he's still alive. Let alone still wrestling. So just to touch on it, they have factions. So we talked about Jacob Fatu. Jacob Fatu is in Contra, which is basically like, I guess, some sort of terrorist organization, and that's
they're not currently signed to MLW, so they're not signed talent. They're an invading force,
right? So it's Fatu, Joseph Samael, and Simon Gotch. So if you have somehow remember Simon Gotch from WWE, he is not the Simon Gotch from WWE.
No.
He is not at all like that. And if you go back, you can kind of see he has gotten rid of that whole gimmick, but he's not a bad wrestler at all. He still has a good gimmick.
He's more of just a badass.
Yeah, he's more of like a fighter. And then you have the Hart Foundation, so Teddy Hart, Davey Boy Smith Jr., and Brian Pillman Jr. It's pretty easy to figure out. That was a smart thing. What they do, the nice thing about the Hart Foundation is they use Teddy Hart and Davey Boy Smith Jr. To Brian Pillman Jr. is basically like their young boy. It's good to have him with them because they've been around for a while. And then they have Dynasty, so that's MJF, Alex Hammerstone, and Richard Holiday. So they're basically just rich pricks, all of them.
Yeah.
And then you have Promociones de
Dorado.
De Laredo. Yeah, so Selena De La Renta has her own faction, and sometimes she produces shows, does stuff like that. And they were actually pretty good, but they're basically like a stable of not
evil luchadors.
Yeah, they're evil luchadors. But then you had like Low Key for a while, but he got kicked out. And then I also want to point out they have Mance Warner. If you haven't seen Mance Warner, I like him a lot. He used to wrestle in CZW, so he kind of has that type of brawler style. But he's a good character. He's another. There are several people on this roster that are just they're amazing. Like Mance Warner is good. Obviously MJF, Brian Pillman Jr., Alex Hammerstone. Basically the whole dynasty.
Yeah.
They just look the part. They act the part. They're really good. Jacob Fatu, like we'll talk about, is amazing. He's a huge dude, and he's like a Bam Bam Bigelow type. Like he's big, but he doesn't move like he's big at all. So
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, so MLW King of Coliseum. Now, this was on 7/6 live from Chicago's Cicero Stadium. Now, this was a 1 hour special on the BN network. They actually shot television on the same show, but it's for the following week. So the following week, we'll get the Hart Foundation versus the Dynasty's ladder match, which I actually saw, which was... This show starts off with Alexander Hammerstone and his Star-Spangled Open National Open Weight Championship Open Challenge, and he faced Cotto Brazil. Now, Alexander Hammerstone is someone that Jim Ross would call a hoss because he is fucking massive.
yeah, that was the toilet. Alexander Hammerstone. I think Jim Cornette loves Alexander Hammerstone.
You could tell,
both in commentary and when he's on his little show. He looks good. He works good. He's just a good wrestler. So, yep. But he's big dude.
Now, part of the dynasty, now they have this national open weight championship where anyone of any weight can compete for the title. I think that's a good gimmick for that belt. I think Cotto Brazil, they did a good job with the David versus Goliath thing here. I think Cotto showed a lot of fire. He's definitely coming up from underneath, and I think overall when it comes to this match, I think it was very solid across the board. I think it got Alexander Hammerstone over as a monster while not hurting Cotto Brazil at all, and I think that's. When you do these matches, especially for these live specials, it's going to be on the network, it's going to be TV, it's going to be live. It's a big deal. When you send two people out there to have a match, and even though Cotto Brazil lost, it didn't hurt him. It actually probably rose his stock a little bit. And I thought this match was booked to perfection.
Yeah, and I think they did a good job having MJF do most of the talking for Dynasty. Yes. I think that they allow both Holiday and Hammerstone to talk, but when, especially in front of a live crowd or like on commentary, anytime they give MJF a mic, it makes them even more hated and gets the crowd ready for the match. So I think that they did a good job. And they announced that they were challenging the Harts for the Hart Foundation for their tag title. So they wanted to.
They issued the challenge, and we'll see later on the night if the Harts accept that challenge. Now, you also had MJF on commentary, and he had a nice little back and forth with Jim Cornette, which I thought was fun, and Rich Burkeen's getting his shots in there when he can. So I thought in terms of getting MJF out there, but he's on commentary, it was great. Having him interact with Jim Cornette, fantastic. And I think overall, again, and I can't say it enough, I thought this match was booked to perfection. Very solid across the board. After that, they hype up the match between Lawler and Fatu. Then you get a backstage kind of interview with Simon Gotch, but he gets attacked by Filthy Tom. So I thought that was fun. You're getting right into hyping up the main event, which is something that a lot of modern wrestling promotions don't do. They are hyping up this main event throughout the show. So I thought that was, really good job by them. I liked the backstage segment. It didn't go on for too long. It wasn't too wordy. It wasn't them trying to recite lines off a piece of paper. Even if it was scripted, which we don't know if it was scripted or not, it didn't come across that way. So I thought it
also did something that a lot of companies don't do called logic. So if Tom Lawler took out Simon Gotch because the Von Erichs aren't there to watch his back. So
they're in Israel promoting MLW.
Right. So that's why it makes sense for them to do that. They didn't have to do that, but they did. And then it made Tom Lawler look like he was like super motivated, and he shaved his head. So there was that. But it was a good job to show that he was there to fuck shit up, and that he was giving the Contra unit, who had like been basically NWOing the shit out of everyone and like doing like Shield, basically just like any other bad guys do. Like the Shield or the NWO, they're just killing or steamrolling everyone, right? So he did that back to them, so it kind of worked out, gave him a little bit of their what for that they've been giving him. So just very small segment, maybe 2 minutes, did a lot of stuff, tied up a lot of loose ends, and just it did something that other companies don't seem to know how to do. It just made sense. So that was nice.
Explains why later on in the night why Country Union does not interfere in the match, and if they did, they explain why the Von Erichs weren't there.
Right.
Super logical. Like Bill Watts level of logic here. Up next, we had Rey Horus, who is, I believe, the nephew of Rey Mysterio Jr., taking on Myron Reed. Again, heels have heat. Myron Reed and Oliver had tons of heat on their show. I was like I never really heard of these guys. I think I've seen them a couple of times prior to this. But, the crowd was super anti Myron Reed and Oliver on this one. And I thought, oh, wow, look, heels have heat. Amazing.
So the thing that I think is interesting about Reed and Oliver, and then they also have Rich Swann, who's a part of their little group, right? I guess they'd be called Justice or something.
Yeah.
So they are the atypical social justice warriors, right? And so they are heels, but they say that the MLW is not giving them a fair shake. So one of the big things is that the ref would come over and search them, but wouldn't search the other guy, right?
Yeah.
And so they were trying to say that even though they would sneak stuff into the ring and do bad stuff, that they were being discriminated against. So this is something that I think that MLW did really well is, A, they let the wrestlers that it seems like they came up with this gimmick. They're very enthusiastic about the gimmick, right?
Yeah,
they're always doing something with it. It's a very simple gimmick, but also it's not done in a way that's rude or distasteful, right? So it kind of just shows that they're heels, and the reason that you don't like them is not because they're social justice warriors, because then that kind of like borders on some weird racist stuff, right?
Right. It's more about like these guys are disingenuous.
Right. So they're manipulating something, and they're doing their as in a guise of this social justice type thing, right? So instead of the WWE way, which is let's see how we can just like steamroll through this very touchy issue, they do a very good job of promoting this in a way that you like. They get heat for the wrong reason, and they're heels for the right reason, not for the wrong reason.
It's not the WWE fucking taking a hammer and hitting you in the face with it 1,000 times. You know what I mean? It's very subtle, and I think they did a great job. Myron Reed gets the win here over, you would think someone that would be getting wins on television and because of who his family is, but no, they do the right thing for business here. So I thought that was really, really well done.
And I would say Myron Reed is like really thin. Like it's a Jim Cornette comment, and he does make it a lot, but he's small. He's probably, I'm like 160 pounds. I'm pretty sure he's slightly bigger than, but he can move. Like he did this almost like Matrix duck reversal thing with Horus, which was pretty crazy. And the match was just good. It was a very high flying type style, but even then, like it was luchador versus like high flyer, but they were saying like making fun of him because he was a luchador. So that was really interesting too, is that they were getting heat that way, pissing off the crowd because they were in Chicago. Crowd evidently, there were a lot of, I don't know if they're like, I think it was probably just Mexicans that were over there because it
was a very Latino heavy crowd. It felt like, for sure.
And they made sound like MJF made reference to it, like it's like they pay attention to people that come to their shows depending on where they're at. And they weren't making fun of Chicago, though they did make some pot shots Chicago. They were just making fun of the crowd and doing things that would piss the crowd off. So that was interesting that Myron Reed and then did that. And then Oliver is like a white dude, but he had this huge sign that that had justice on it. And obviously he was trying to use that to mess with Horus. But the thing about Horus is that they keep mentioning is that Selena De La Renta is interested in him. So anytime he has a match, they always say something about how she's interested. Right. So they're planning.
They use her well. They plant her in the crowd every once in a while, and she's definitely scouting talent. Very much like like Woman used to do, and Sherry did in WCW, where they put her in the crowd for seemingly no reason, but there was always a reason. And sometimes it wasn't a reason because it was WCW. They would just do things like that. But I thought Reed's fucking springboard uppercut was fucking phenomenal.
Yeah,
it's like holy shit, high impact for sure. After that, we get a backstage interview with Georgia Smith, who's actually the sister of Davey Boy Smith. I don't know if they mentioned that in that interview. I don't think they did. It seemed like they had some technical difficulties on the show because I felt like the mic was turned down a little bit. So it was kind of hard to hear what they were saying, but they got their point across. So they accepted the match. They added they added two stipulations. Number one, that it was going to be Brian Pillman Jr. taking Harry Smith's, Davey Boy Smith Jr.'s spot in the match, and the match was going to be a Stampede Wrestling innovated ladder match, which I thought was a nice little, they mentioned Stampede Wrestling. Holy shit, look at that.
They mentioned Bad News Allen.
They did! First of all, I love Bad News Allen. If you want to be a dick about it, call him Bad News Brown. But I love me some Bad News. There was a point in Stampede where they turned him babyface and they called him Good News Allen?
No, I didn't know.
Yes. Good News Allen. I'll bring that character back. Look what they're doing. They're setting up the next show. Look at that. They're setting up the next set of TV that they're going to have this ladder match. Awesome. Look at that. Who would have thunk it?
They said they were free. It was Freebird rules too.
Yeah.
So that was they pointed that out. So that's when they brought it, and it was cool because it looked like Brian Pillman didn't. It was a surprise to him, right? So they did that too. So I don't know. Like, we keep pointing out all these very stupid, pointless things, but these are things that are missing from a lot of the mainstream product, and they're things that I think that they just take for granted, but are so important because it gives you the frame of reference that you need. It's like writing a book. So you you don't always have to point out these big things, but if they're missing, you can tell that it's not right. So I think that they do a good job of doing little itty bitty things that aren't important, but because they're so lacking in the larger product, that when they're in this type of product, it's just sadly really noticeable, and you're like, appreciate something as stupid as someone acting surprised when they're supposed to be surprised. Yeah. Like, if they're making this decision live, he probably shouldn't know about it if they say that he doesn't know about it. But for some reason in WWE, no one seems to really ever be surprised about things like this. So I don't know.
Devil is always in the details, for sure.
Yes, sir.
After that, we get a live Jim Cornette experience with Selena De La Renta. I know there's a lot of people either love Jim Cornette or hate Jim Cornette. I'm in the pro Jim Cornette camp, personally. I've been listening to him on various shoot interviews since the early 90s. Just when you think you can't get a fresh story out of Cornette, he comes up with one. That's fucking awesome. I actually have his book, too, the Midnight Express scrapbook, which is fantastic. His record keeping is impeccable, by the way. And it's fucking fantastic. So, he brings out Selena, who he loves, by the way, and the fact that, she speaks 3 languages, and she's the first Latino female executive producer for a wrestling program. And, he asked, the most obvious question, which is, when will La Park cash in his Battle Riot golden ticket? Selena, says, I'm not going to let anyone know that. I'm not going to reveal that. And then the conversations, goes to Conan. They start talking about Conan, and Selena calls Conan weak for not able to keep his stars in MLW, and the fact that he can never please a woman, which is like, ooh, jeez, that's below the belt. And then she reminds the MLW crowd that Conan was stabbed live on television the last time he was there. So. And then Conan comes out, and they have a nice back and forth, and if you know Spanish, fucking Conan fucking says some shit. Not stuff that we're going to say live on the air here, but he says some things. So, get your Google translators out. I don't know if they're even on Google Translate, but...
Well, if you know enough of Spanish, you know.
Even if you didn't know Spanish, you'd be like, oh, he says some fucked up shit.
Yeah, I knew like maybe 1 or 2 words, but I knew that none of the words that I knew were good. I don't know. I appreciate that about the product. Yeah. That they...
And she also said that she had a secret that's going to ruin Conan's career. Hopefully it's not like the envelope, like Baby Doll and Tully Blanchard's envelope for that Dusty, or the pinup picture of Miss Elizabeth that we never got at WrestleMania 8. But hopefully there's a payoff for whatever this
maybe secret. He has a secret son.
Oh, maybe.
It turns out to be I don't know, Austin Aries, because Austin Aries is technically on the roster. That would be fine. Because let's just do something. Let's swerve it to swerve it. But no, she's really
like, no, Conan killed Paco Alonso. Like, oh shit.
Conan was actually killed Brody. All right, anyway.
Wow.
He was in Puerto Rico. I don't know. She's really good. She's really young. She is kind of raw, but I don't know. Like, she gave a promo. She couldn't say Entrepreneur of the Year, so she messed up. And she said it, she messed up, and then she said, I don't give a shit. I can speak 3 languages. Yeah. So she caught herself. And even Cornette, don't always agree with Jim Cornette about some things, but I like Jim Cornette because he literally, he appreciates the history of pro wrestling. He respects it, and he just knows everything about pro wrestling. So just because I don't agree with him, I think it's more of an age thing sometimes than it is that he's wrong. Like, I can always, he always articulates his point, and I can understand where he comes from, and I respect him. I respect his opinions on things because a lot of times he's not wrong.
It's just basically, it comes down to his preference.
Right.
Like, just because he doesn't like something doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad. Although a lot of cases he is right, and I do agree with him on I would say like 95% of what he says. I think I'm a little bit more open-minded when it comes to modern wrestling than he is, but that's also an age thing. And then the way he feels about wrestling, it's like saying someone that just watched wrestling for the last 10 years, they're going to have a different way they look at wrestling versus me, who's been watching since 1987, or Cornette, who's been watching since the early 70s and been in wrestling in the early 80s. And so he's, it's a different approach and a different mindset when it comes to professional wrestling, and that's okay. But I don't find myself, his points are always well made. Now he may be a little over the top with some of his points, but they're not bad opinions. For we see a lot of opinions on Twitter that are just bad takes because those people's opinions are uninformed or uneducated. And whatever you can say about Jim Cornette, his opinion's not uneducated, so it needs to be respected.
And I think I appreciate him. Like, he will work. He will work if he thinks that it works. So if you watch this, if you decide, hey, I want to watch MLW, he does not like Sami Callihan. Not a big fan of him, and he'll explain if you listen to Jim Cornette Experience, or you watch him hit Sami Callihan hit Eddie Edwards in the face with a baseball bat. Yeah, that's probably why. But again,
and Eddie Edwards is one of Cornette's boys. Like,
yeah,
Cornette loves Eddie Edwards. So seeing that happen to like someone that he appreciates and really liked too has something to do with that. And I also think, let's be honest here, that a lot of his angst against AEW probably comes, at least a little bit of it, the fact that he is working currently for the competition.
Yeah, and he doesn't like the Young Bucks, and he doesn't like Kenny Omega, but he does like Cody.
He does like Cody. He puts over like what he likes. He says he likes on their show.
He does.
He doesn't like the Young Bucks, and and I think it stems from them super kicking that kid. But I always thought when Cornette booked the Bucks when he was on he was on creative. He wasn't necessarily Delirious was the booker during that time he was in Ring of Honor, but Cornette had influence. But I thought he booked the Bucks well. He didn't, they had like fantastic matches with like Kyle O'Reilly and Adam Cole. They had good matches with the Briscoes. They weren't like fucking shitted on when Cornette worked with them. I think it's just like, oh, in his opinion, they're making a mockery of professional wrestling, and the same can go for Omega. Now he'll put over his talent, but it's like he still can't get over the fact that he wrestled that blow up doll. He wrestled that girl, and he says, because Omega says weird stuff sometimes, like, oh, wrestling is my art form. It's like because you can't, because art is subjective, and you can't really criticize art because art is art. You know what I mean? And I think Omega uses that as a shield sometimes to do shenanigans. Omega's top 3 worker in the world. Let's be honest. But you can see why he can rub Cornette the wrong way for sure.
Yeah, well, just going back to the thing I was saying about Sami Callihan, like, and you said with the Young Bucks too, like he'll work with you. Like if you do things, or he needs to work with you. If you're in the promotion, he needs to work. He'll do it. Like he will say things like, I think Sami Callihan is dangerous and he sucks, but it fits with him as the promoter, or not as the promoter, but as the announcer. Right. So he may really think that Sami Callihan is a dangerous worker, and he'll say it, but it will come off good, and you can tell that they're trying to work together to build that heat and animosity. Yeah. But if you want, the reason we keep talking about Jim Cornette, he won't be there forever. Tony Schiavone will be taking over for him here shortly, but right now he's the voice of MLW, and he's just really good. And I think if you want to learn, and like if you want to get in to wrestling as far as, I don't know, like being a smart, or being a smart mark.
Not for nothing, Cornette is the original smart mark. He was early. I'm talking about early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. He went to the fan club conventions back in the day, and
so he was in Memphis. He was a photographer, all that kind of stuff. Because if there's one place that takes wrestling seriously, it's Memphis. So, but he got in
half the time. It depends who's booking. If Jerry Jarrett's booking, it's serious. So when Lawler's booking, he is Dr. Frank and Batman and shit like that.
They had so he got in with the Lawlers. So he got in with not the Lawlers, but the Jarretts. So he got in with Jerry Jarrett's mom, who used to book shows in Nashville.
One of the early female promoters, which WWE fails to recognize. But whatever, because Stephanie's the first female promoter ever.
Well, obviously.
Not Leah Maivia, not Ann Gunkel. No, not Mrs. Baba. No, it's Stephanie McMahon, apparently. What the
obvious. Fuck? Why would there's literally if the McMahon does it, it's the first.
It's the only one that matters, right?
That's right. Anyway, but yeah, so they had that, but yeah, Cornette. You interviewed him for his Jim Cornette experience. It was good. It was fun. Conan is definitely older, but they keep pointing it out. She makes fun of him for being fat, basically, I think. Yeah. So, it's cool to see Conan out there. He still seems pretty crazy. He has his own podcast. Everyone has their own podcast, but Conan has his own podcast, and it's pretty interesting to listen to him. I think he comes from a unique perspective because he was in Mexico and in the United States. Yeah. Not a lot of podcasters have that background where he was like huge.
Let's be honest, he was literally as popular as Hulk Hogan was in the United States and Mexico. He was that.
Didn't he have dreads?
Yeah, it's fucking Conan. Of course he had dreads. He was also on fucking soap operas and shit, and he would date famous actresses in Mexico. Like I think he had an album too. I'm pretty sure.
But then WWE wanted to make him some sort of like
Max Moon.
Yeah. That was awesome. Anyway,
I think that was his idea though.
That's awful. But he went to WCW, so whatever. Yeah. Probably a better choice. And he brought in a lot of those luchadors. So thanks, Conan.
He helped found AAA. That's a big fucking deal. It's like that was the split. So like Conan is very important in terms of professional wrestling and in general, especially with the Lucha Libre coming into the United States and doing those shows in the early 90s, and now AAA is doing a show at Madison Square Garden in September. So you can definitely see Conan having a foot in both worlds, how important that is.
And speaking of other promotions, if you want to check out a good Mexican promotion, if you're feeling brave, check out AAA because it's dope.
It is.
It is really good.
Big Mommy is my favorite, by the way.
I don't know. I really like. I don't know. Psycho Clown always trips me out.
Psycho Clown, Phoenix, Penta, they're so good. And speaking of someone coming in from AAA, next up we get a vignette for Dr. Wagner Jr.
That's true. Dr. Wagner. If you want to watch a great match, Dr. Wagner Jr., Psycho Clown, mass versus mass match, stellar. If you want to understand Lucha Libre and what it really means in
emotion.
Mexico, yes, in Mexico, you need to watch that match because it does a good job of highlighting it. And I don't even speak Spanish, and it was all in Spanish, and I was really into it.
Yeah, I never watched the English commentary of Triple H ever. Don't do it. Don't do it ever. Just watch the Spanish commentary, or just mute it. But watch the Spanish commentary. It's like listening to New Japan with Japanese. Like you can, when they inflect things, it still draws you in, even if you don't know what they're saying.
Right. So you can get into it, but yes, and then you can see what lucha libre is, because people talk about lucha libre, but lucha libre in the United States is a lot different than lucha libre in Mexico.
Yeah, it's religion.
Well, and it's just the type. Wrestling is just different.
Yeah,
it's not like it is here in the States, and it's not like it is in Japan. I would say that if you had to put them on a spectrum, I would say that New Japan is probably the most conservative, serious wrestling promotion. And then I would say like Lucha Libre is center left. So it's serious, but it's not like super stoic in the sense of it's like more carny, right? But they take the matches seriously.
It's like a party and then you have this fight in the middle of this party.
Yeah. So like Psycho Clown will go and pick children up out of the crowd, and then he'll go fight somebody. But they are all excited about it. So it's like, it's weird, but it's not stupid wrestling. It's just different. But if you can appreciate it, you can get a lot out of it, because just like anything, you're missing out if you don't know who Sammy Guevara is because of AEW.
Yeah.
He fights a lot in AAA. Yeah. So with that guy I just ate, Laredo Kid, he's the AEW cruiserweight champion or something, light heavyweight champion. He got it from Sammy Guevara. So
you have Jack Evans, who is one of my favorites of all time, and he does a lot of work in AAA, and Cody MJF are going down there.
Yeah, that's
so
it.
I'm really curious to see what that's going to be about.
And Jeff Jarrett went down there and threw tortillas at people.
Oh, fucking Jeff. So. Wasn't he drunk for that match? I vaguely remember that.
That was before rehab, so I don't know.
We love you, Jeff.
He's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, we love Jeff.
Jeff Jarrett is very underappreciated, and
it's not his fault. It's not his fault that Russo really liked him and overpushed him in WCW. It's not his fault that he was in charge of TNA and he put himself on top. Because I would have done the same thing.
But he wasn't bad when he was on top either. It's not like
no. It was
he put people over too. Like he wasn't He wasn't Vern Gagne. So
no. Vern Gagne, I'm going to retire the champ. Fuck it.
Hogan, you want to be the champ? I don't think so. Let's stick with Nick.
You have to marry my daughter first. What? And I want your Japanese money. What?
Nick Ballwinkle. People love him. He'll pack the house forever. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Not for nothing. Over the last couple of years, I've been gaining a greater appreciation for Bockwinkel. So
I like Bockwinkel. It's not him that's the problem. Oh. It's
why is he world champion at 50? I have no fucking idea.
Why is he not losing to Hogan, who's over? He's so over. Vern, this is your company. If Hogan wins, I don't think WWE buys out the rest of the country.
I don't know, because there's a good possibility that Hogan would have went with that belt anyway.
True.
I'm going to take this AWA belt to the WWF. The bottom line is that Hulk Hogan was the biggest star in professional wrestling before he went to WWF.
Yeah.
And by the time we got to WWF, he became a pop culture icon.
Yeah. Hogan Hulkamania was running wild long before he got to New York. So,
yeah, for sure.
And somebody told me that he thinks that the IWGP title is greater than the WWF title. I don't know.
Trinket. It's just a trinket. It's
just a trinket.
It's like an ornament on a Christmas tree.
I don't know who said that, brother. But yeah.
I think he still thinks that.
Look at that. I don't know. I'm not gonna say anything about that. But yeah. So okay. So we had the Selena De La Renta thing. So that was cool.
So you had the Dynasty interview, and then MJF looks upset because he's afraid of heights. Looks like. And
it's a ladder match. So that's what's cool too, because Hammerstone was like, "Yeah, we accept it," and MJF had in AirPods. Yeah. So they have AirPods in, and he can't hear, right? Because they're assholes, they're wearing AirPods.
Yes.
So he finally mutes it after Hammerstone has accepted it.
Click twice.
Yeah, or not Hammerstone, but Holiday has accepted it with Hammerstone. And now he's super pissed because he doesn't want to do a ladder match, which I think I wouldn't want to do a ladder match with Teddy Hart either. So I don't want to get a super Canadian destroyer off of top of the ladder. But
and if you watch the next TV, that it plays a part into the next TV. Fancy that.
Are you saying that they have a linear, congruent storyline that they follow week to week?
Yes, because MJF refuses to climb the fucking ladder.
That's amazing.
And he makes Aria Blake climb it for him.
Oh yeah, Aria Blake is like his girlfriend.
She's all the way live, by the way.
Yeah, and
wearing that blueberry, the blueberry, the Burberry. She wears the Burberry just like his scarf. So,
and he makes constant sexual innuendos all the time.
I mean,
and he says them very subtly. You have to pay attention, but he says it all the time.
Yeah.
So he is all the way douche.
Yeah.
Out to 11. So
then guess what we get next, Luke? What? We get footage of Contra Unit's exploits, destroying everyone in MLW. So you understand how powerful Contra Unit is, even though this could be your first show watching. Because every show is someone's first show.
Yeah, and they burn Ray Phoenix's face.
Yeah.
Those bastards. So Joseph Samael, FYI, is the Sheik. He is the new Sheik, approved by Sabu, just in case you didn't know that. So that's why
NWA Florida champion.
Yeah, and he was the actual NWA champion for a while. I think. I thought he was. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, he has the curly toe shoes, so you know he's a real Sheik.
Yes, because they can only have curly toe shoes.
Yeah, only the Sheiks, though. But yeah. So anyway, so yes, they have they show how the feud got started. So
look.
Yeah, they actually attacked Tom Lawler at the arena that they're at now to begin their reign of terror. So
it comes full circle.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The Sheik is, by the way, the 44th officially recognized NWA World Heavyweight Champion.
Okay, thank you. I knew.
He was stripped of the title in 2011 because he refused to defend it.
Yeah, I don't remember.
That was a whole fucking thing, if I remember correctly. That was a whole fucking thing.
Yeah, I guess. Didn't he say he wasn't booked or something? I don't know.
Yeah, they screwed him out of the belt or some shit.
Yeah.
And that's when the NWA was doing all kinds of weird that. That's when around the time they were doing the Cabana Adam Pearce thing, like the 7 levels of hate and that kind of stuff. And I don't know, they went weird.
That's sad. They're doing all right now.
Yeah, no. Well, Lagana and Billy Corgan are doing some good stuff over there. So
Cabana just lost. I don't know who the new champion is.
James Storm.
That's right.
James Storm beat Colts.
Yeah. So Mickey James's husband is the NWA champion.
Yes.
That's so weird that they're married. Did not put those together, but it's true. It's true.
Good for him.
Yeah. He's a good-looking guy, man. It's surprising.
He's a good. You put him in a suit with the belt, he looks good for sure.
He does.
He's good matches too.
Yeah, he does have good. Always has good matches. He's underappreciated. I'm glad that they gave him the belt. Yeah. So that was a good idea. Because who was on before?
It was what's his name? I'll tell you right now.
Something Storm. It wasn't James Storm.
No, Tim Storm was a champion before him.
Yeah, Tim Storm.
Yes, the school teacher.
Yeah, not a bad guy. So, but that's where the NWA title was, and I think Nick Aldis and how they booked it and the way that they've worked it has definitely made it much better than where it was. Nothing against Tim Storm. But.
Yeah, Tim Storm transitioned from the old regime to the new regime, so
that's good.
But I think didn't Tim Storm beat him the first in Aldis's first attempt at the belt, if I remember correctly?
Pretty sure. I think they did something. Yeah, I don't know. Well, Aldis has lost it to Cody too.
Yeah,
and then he won it back. So he's lost it a couple times, but he's always got it back in the rematch. which is awesome.
And he defended the belt in China as well.
Yeah, against Colt Cabana.
Colt Cabana, yep.
Good old Colt Cabana. What could have been? What could have been? Poor guy.
He just announced that he's ending his podcast.
Yeah, well, he like changed it. So he used to interview a bunch of independent wrestlers, and then he changed it to like a diary. I didn't really listen to it because I liked when he interviewed people, but then he had this one guy on who completely buried rich people, and then they sued him. And
he not only he lost a friend.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he lost a friend. I think it's the other way around.
Oh, okay.
But it was awesome, but also not awesome because he was an innocent bystander between two really angry, wealthy people.
Yeah.
So, and he got kind of drug into it, which wasn't, again, his fault at all because he had how many shows before this?
Right.
And this just happened to be the one. So, but if you don't know that,
but if it wasn't for Colt, none of us would be doing shows.
That's true. Colt is the first and the best, I would say, especially some of his earlier stuff. Because I would say like Chris Jericho is like Colt Cabana now because he has access to everybody.
Yeah.
But before this whole thing happened, everybody went on Cabana's show because and it wasn't just like up and comers. It was old guy, everybody.
Legends. He had new guys. He had guys who were just breaking into the scene. He had promoters. He had everybody on his show, and I think he did a fantastic job. And it was him. And I remember like when wrestling podcasts first became a thing. It was, and I was there for Cabana's. Like I think I was listening to his very first show when it came out. It was him and Cornette who had a show too at the time, and those were like the two big ones. And then I don't know when Austin started his, but it wasn't too far after that than Austin. But Austin's hard to listen to.
Yeah, I would say Chris Jericho is probably what Cabana was, but Jericho has all kinds of people on there, not just wrestlers. Cabana's was just strictly wrestlers. He was like I guess Cabana is more like Joe Rogan, whereas Jericho will actually interview people, but Cabana would just let people talk, kind of like Rogan, and ask questions here and there. But it was always interesting, and he like if you want to listen to early stuff, I mean, he had like Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, he had all those guys.
The best one being Cliff Compton when he goes to Africa.
Yeah,
like go back and listen to that show. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that was like basically anybody that was an independent wrestler that got signed by WWE was interviewed. He like interviewed Generico, who is Sami Zayn, and he did Steen multiple times, Kevin Owens. So he was good. It was good. He's a good guy. I just feel bad. I hope CM Punk comes back and people just chant Colt Cabana every time he comes in. And then they have.
I hope they reconcile because they like. You ever seen the Colt Cabana CM Punk shoot interview when they did together? Like that one is like you can like there's love there. Like
they lived together.
They're brothers. You know what I mean? And
they lived like when CM Punk was champion, he lived with Colt Cabana. And like the WWE Championship would like just be on the floor in the living room. Like that'd be hard, especially for Colt Cabana, who pretty much got screwed out of like.
It's funny. It's funny when I watched Cabana and Punk, especially like in IWA Mid South, and I looked at them like I like Punk, I like Cabana, but if I had to pick one that would end up in the WWE, I thought it would be Cabana. He's bigger, he does more athletic things. And I think a comedy gimmick, a guy who wants to do a comedy gimmick, the WWE would fucking love this guy. He would be like in the Santino role and have a job for 30 years. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that wasn't the case. And that was sad because I thought, because Cabana had the size, for sure.
Yeah. I don't know what but yeah, I think
people forgot how big Cabana was back in the day. Like you watch early Ring of Honor, like he's a big fucking dude.
I think that they should have a Colt Cabana CM Punk feud, and they should have a blow-off match for $15 million. so Colt can pay off the lawyer fees that Punk said that he would pay for because it's Punk's fault. that he got sued. But whatever. If
It's his
CM Punk
fault,
came,
but like they won the lawsuit though.
right, but they had to pay lawyer fees is the
Right.
thing. So like Punk was like, yeah, I'll pay for your lawyer, whatever. And then he was like, nah, I'm just
Like, how much is it? I
$6
see you're
million.
making your pro wrestling tees money. Can you help me you pay some of this? Cabana be like, no.
Yeah. I don't know. But
Did anyone
if
figure out what Cabana's relationship with Pro Wrestling Tees is? Is he part owner? Someone
I
told me a while back that he was a part owner.
I think he is because it's in Chicago. It's like right by his
Yeah.
house. I
And
think
his
it's like
dad
him.
his dad's job was in the clothing business.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
His brother's an artist.
Yeah. He's on Family Guy.
There you go. Things you would know if you listened to Cole Cabana's podcast, The Art of Wrestling, which is now defunct. But you should go back and listen to it.
Yeah, listen to him again.
Honestly, listening to Cole Cabana is soothing. Seriously, if you like podcasts, just in general, it's a good podcast. Interesting. It brings a lot of people on there. But anyway, so finally the main event. Contra Unit, Joseph Samael, Jacob Fatu, Samoan Werewolf. He's what? Same height, 6'2", I think, 300 pounds. Lawler's what? 6'2", 230, something?
Around there.
Yeah. So it's long time, long build up. Lawler's pissed, but it's a surprising match for all the right reasons, and not because there's not a swerve the entire time.
Oh.
Nothing out of the ordinary happens.
No run-ins either.
No real interference other than the occasional manager BS, but nothing that changes the course of the match. But Jacob Fatu, amazing. He does what? He did like a handspring lariat and a pop-up Samoan drop or something ridiculous.
Yeah, fucking insane.
He can do a moon. He did
crazy moveset for this guy. Like, oh wow, and everyone should know that he is the son of Sam Fatu, the Tonga kid, one half of the Islanders, one half of the one of the greatest duos and wrestling film history. If you ever watched Body Slam, they should do Body Slam 2 with John Moxley and Jacob Fatu.
And he's the nephew of Roman Reigns and the cousins of the Usos. Yeah. And his uncle is, what's his nuts?
Rikishi.
Rikishi, yes. Yeah. And he was trained by Rikishi.
Yes.
So, yeah. But he...
Another one?
Yeah. But he's not... He's more Umaga than he is Rikishi or Roman Reigns. But he moves not like any of those.
You mean we're not going to get a Make a Difference Jacob Fatu in the near future?
I don't think so, but I think
I do miss my Make a Difference Rikishi Fatu.
Yeah, no, I don't know. He's ridiculous. He's like Bam Bam Bigelow. That's probably the best. A more acrobatic Bam.
Big guy that can move.
Yeah. Surprise.
I mean, he does remind me of Head Shrinker Fatu. For sure. Samoan SWAT Team Fatu. He definitely reminds me of that because I think a lot of people everyone remembers Rikishi with thongs and all that shit. Like a lot of people don't remember Fatu back in the days doing your shit. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So like they were super athletic and stuff like that, and I wish they would have done more with that Head Shrinker Yokozuna 6-man team that they never did anything with.
That's it. But so Lawler, being the smaller man, keeps trying to get the choke on, so he can't. And they emphasize this: cannot get the choke synced in because Fatu's neck is so big. If you've ever tried to choke someone that has a thick neck, that is not a lie. It's not easy to get that choke in. So it actually makes sense. And because Fatu is so much larger, he is able to kind of control the match. Though Lawler tries to fight out and do certain things, but he never overpowers Fatu. He out wrestles him.
Yeah.
So But in the end, he gets hit with the moonsault, who, by the way, no one has kicked out of.
Nope.
Hits him
Fancy that. No one kicks out of a finisher? He doesn't have to hit it 4 times?
No.
Holy shit.
He wins the match. He wins the belt. And there's no run-in.
Doesn't Goofy Lacey Evans do that same moonsault?
I think so. But he makes it look better.
He does.
But yeah, so he wins on his own right, and he wins the championship.
Wins clean.
Something I saw. Yeah, wins clean. Not something I saw coming. But he won, and he won clean, and it looked good, and it just made sense. And I was like, wow, this bad guy who's been dominating everybody just won.
Yeah.
And it was really neat. But so the funny thing is that prior to this, they had a 6-man tag, and it was the Von Erichs who they were trying to introduce, and Lawler, and they fought and beat the shit out of Contra. But it was back and forth. So Contra still got their comeuppance as a unit, but they beat Lawler. And because they're not under contract, they kept making the point that normally they don't care about winning, but this is important because they want to take the championship away from MLW. And that's what they did.
Yeah. Now you have so many stories coming out of this. It's like, what are the Von Erichs reactions going to be? Will Tom Lawler get a rematch and his revenge? Will they even defend the belt? So they're going to take the belts and run away. You don't know.
And you still have La Parka waiting.
Yes, you do. La Parka's going to come out with a chair and cash in his golden ticket for the golden
with his
chair.
son, El Hijo de La Parka. I looked up El Hijo. I wanted to know what Dr. Wagner Jr.'s son's name is because he's in that match, or he comes to the match with his dad, and his name is El Hijo de Dr. Wagner Jr. And I didn't know, because I don't speak Spanish, El Hijo just means the son of.
Yes.
So, El Hijo de. So, yeah, that's this late, they're basically just young boys. They don't have names. And then when they become full time, I guess when they kind of come out on their own, they get new names. So they either get a junior designator, or they just have a different name.
Yeah.
Which is cool. But there's El Hijo La Parka he's kind of cool. He's got he looks like his dad, but he has different gear.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was cool. But yeah, so we kind of covered, if you watch this, it's very short. It's 3 matches. I think it lasts maybe an hour. They packed all this into an hour and a half.
Took us an hour just to explain it.
Yeah. And we could have just told you the card.
Yeah.
If you watch it, you literally just watch the hour, and that's it. And you now know what happened the week before and what's going to happen next week, all in one. That's it.
Again, and I'll say this over and over again, just super fundamentally sound, solid across the board. It's it's a good show. And again, if you're a modern wrestling fan that likes a little bit of shenanigans in your show, I think you'll appreciate what MLW is doing. If you're a traditionalist like myself, you'll really appreciate what they're doing. They ride the line so well. There's nothing in here that's completely you can roll your eyes at. And ever now where, you'll see Twitter clips, you see all kinds of crazy shit on social media with different wrestling promotions, most of them being outlaw mud shows or what have you. It's good to see just a professionally run. It's not super serious. It's not too serious, but serious enough. It feels very Mid-South like if you watch Mid-South wrestling, and the way that everything gets explained. Because again, every show is someone's first show.
That's true.
And I think more wrestling promotions need to understand that.
But I mean, as far as our first episode, MLW is a good place to start. Very neutral ground, like we talked about. That spectrum, squarely in the middle. It's everything that you want and need from wrestling, because you will literally get a myriad of styles, myriad of matches. And it changes every week, but it's not. They think they're gonna have a pay-per-view that's gonna be pretty long, but it's never gonna be over an hour, really, and it's always gonna be clear and concise, and it's not a lot. There's not a lot
I
of
think
extra.
if you like NXT, you'll like this show
Yes,
because they're similar.
very.
Very
And
similar.
I think that they have better workers
I do. Yeah,
sometimes than Next. Now, Next has a lot of great workers, and Next is a completely different thing.
They got trainees too, so it's like
Right.
you think you're good, but you're bad with NXT. So, but I think if you like NXT, I think you'll appreciate MLW. I think if you like AEW because they use some of their stars, you'll like MLW. I think it's almost like MLW is like a catch-all. They'll grab everything.
Yes.
And the unfortunate thing about MLW, I just think that AEW took a lot of their buzz.
Yes.
I mean, imagine like if a John Moxley would have showed up at MLW, how much more people would be talking about it. Or if Jericho ended up there, how much more people would be talking about it. But they're flying a little bit under the radar, and that's good for them because they can grow and be solid and create a universe. And I think a lot of new promotions don't do universe creation. They don't create their universe. And I think MLW is doing a fantastic job of creating their universe. So when they go off the beating path, when they do a heavy angle or something that's like when they do shenanigans and tomfoolery, you have like the WWE had like 50 years of being like straight-laced professional wrestling before they fucking went off the rails. Obviously Major League Wrestling is not going to have 50 years, but even in 3 years, 4 years, they have enough equity in the bank where they can veer off and do something wild.
Well, I mean, they did cut Contra Unit kidnapped Tom Lawler and cut his hair. Yeah. So they threw him in the back of a car. So it's
but they're not running over kids there like they are in TNA.
Yeah, but again, is it ridiculous? Sure as shit it's ridiculous, but it's not. It's wrestling ridiculous. Right. If you're watching a wrestling show, that's pretty much par for the course. But that's not every single angle. Like some people just wrestle to wrestle. Right. Believe it or not, in a wrestling promotion.
I want to win championships and get money.
That's insane. So they still do things, right? Like it's still, the wrestling still matters. So I think that MLW is a good place to start. And like Alex said, we're going to be doing some older shows from some different promotions, and then we can get into what is the weird and the wacky of wrestling and some of the nasty parts of wrestling. Like I would like, if you know what, like CEW or CZW is awful wrestling, but good grief, if you watch it, it's crazy. So, but there are people on there that I didn't know about, but if I educate myself, it makes it interesting. So,
guys, in the future, we're gonna do, such promotions as Game Changer Wrestling. We're gonna do your House of Hardcores. We're gonna go back, to the '80s and do the Paphos ICW. We'll do Herb Abrams UWF. We'll do War. We'll do FMW. We'll do CZW. We will do the worst promotion of all time, which is XPW. We'll look at Wrestling Society X. We'll even take a look at IWA Mid-South. We'll take a look at all these promotions and more on future episodes. So definitely stay tuned.
And if you want to check out MLW, you can go to BN Sports. I don't know what that is, but you can go to YouTube, which everybody has, and they'll come out weekly.
Yeah.
And they'll do like TV tapings, and then they'll have like an event. So King's Coliseum was an event, and they'll have they're called MLW Fusions, and then they'll have another event. So very interesting stuff. You want to keep following it. It's easy. Just follow their channel on YouTube. So it's pretty easy to follow, and enjoy, especially. So, but yeah, it was a good show. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think if I give it out of 5, I'll probably give it a 4.5 out of 5. I really did enjoy this show, guys, and I definitely recommend it. Highly recommend it. As our good friend Tom would say, for Luke Martin, I'm Alex G. Have a good night.